right, Dalton, last week we ranked my top 10 quarterback rooms in college football, and you tore that to shreds, so I'm very excited for this. Our top 10 running back units in college football heading into the 2024 season. You can check out these lists over at pff.com. I ranked every single position group in college football, and now we're doing our running back units right now. So start off with my number 10, which is West Virginia, who has two really good running backs heading into next year. Dalton, Jaheim White led all true freshmen last year with 842 rushing yards. He also averaged 7.7 yards per carry, which led the nation for running backs. As a true freshman, Jaheim White did that. And then they have C.J. Donaldson behind him. He was fourth among Big 12 running backs with 11 rushing touchdowns. And the only three who had more were Ollie Gordon, Devin Neal, and R.J. Harvey, who all three were in our top 10 running backs in the country. So at number 10 is West Virginia. Number Big 12 school here at number 9 in Kansas State with DJ Giddens there, who had the fourth most receiving yards in the Power 5. Dylan Edwards had the eighth most receiving yards in the Power 5, the Colorado transfer. So I think Kansas State has the best running back duo in terms of receiving ability in college football right now. And Dylan Edwards, as a true freshman, man, had 300 receiving yards as well. So really impressive there. And Giddens had over 1,200 rushing yards as well last year too. So DJ Giddens, one of our top 10 running backs in the country, and you add Dylan Edwards in the transfer portal. So that's why they can check in at number 9 on my list. The other Kansas school here at number 8 is Kansas, obviously, with Devin Neal leading that group with 2,373 rushing yards over the last 2 years, which is only behind Quinshon Judkins and Blake Corum. 25 rushing touchdowns over the last 2 years. Again, fourth to Judkins, Corum, and Audric Estime. And then their number 2 running back is Daniel Hishaw Jr., who had a 38% forced missed tackle rate, which tied for 5th in the country last year among all running backs. So two really good running backs there for Kansas, who checks in at number 8 on my list. Number 7 is Oregon, who lost Bucky Irving, obviously, but Jordan James is back. He had a 94.8 rushing grade last year, and he picked up a first down or touchdown on 42% of his carries, which led the nation. Noah Whittington only played in 3 games this past season, but the year before, he had nearly 800 rushing yards and was 7th in the Pac-12 with an 80.3 PFF grade. And then they also have a guy, Jaden Lamar, who's a top 20 recruit in the 2023 class for running backs. And then Jay Harris transferring in from Northwest Missouri State, who was 7th in D2 with over 1,400 rushing yards as well. So Oregon checks in at number 7. And at number 6 is Miami, who lost its leading rusher to the transfer portal, but they got an even better one in Damian Martinez coming in from Oregon State, one of my top 10 running backs in the country. Over the last 2 years, he has over 1,300 yards after contact, which is 4th in the among returning Power 5 backs. He's a really, really good player. And they also have Mark Fletcher Jr., true sophomore there, who as a true freshman had a 32% forced missed tackle rate, which was 2nd in the ACC. A.J. Allen had a 77.1 grade as well. He comes back. And also they added a couple 4-star recruits as well, and Chris Johnson Jr. and Jordan Lyle. So that's my 10 through 6, Dalton, of the running back units. What do you think about that list right there?
Something that stood out to me this entire offseason is just the level of loaded that the Big 12 is with running backs and running games in general, man. I mean, you've got 3 leading off here, 8, 9, 10, Kansas, K-State, and West Virginia. And I can tell, more so the quarterbacks, you kind of have to lean in on the starter because you only use one on the field at a time. But, very often 3 or 4 running backs can play in a single game. We've got 3 Big 12 teams so far, and those don't even include Ollie Gordon in Oklahoma State, Taj Brooks in Texas Tech, and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who now just went to Arizona. And those are freak shows all at running back too. And obviously, I like that you lean in on the depth here for sure, right? Like Kansas has a couple of guys. K-State's got like Dylan Edwards, I think is such a great fit, a great compliment to DJ Giddens over there. Giddens is a powerful between the tackles runner. Dylan Edwards can move in space, man. He's got blazing speed. If you get him to turn the corner, and I think a lot of like even the inverted option stuff that they can run with Avery Johnson, I think Dylan Edwards is a big time threat at K-State. West Virginia's offense, we're very, very high on them. The story of running backs to me is the Big 12. There's at least 9 or 10 of the, I think 14 teams it is now. I lose count with all the realignment, but like there's at least 9 or 10 teams in the Big 12 where I'm like, holy hell, they can run the ball. And 3 of them right here. A couple of them are off the list, and I think we have one more coming. But it's a freak show. Maybe the X factor in the Big 12 is who in the world can stop all these guys or at least slow them down. Last year, it was Texas, right? One of the best run defenses in the country, Sweat and Murphy and all that. Who's left in the Big 12 that can stop the run? Because you're playing an elite back or an elite group of backs every week.
Yeah, the fact that the number one running back in the country in Ollie Gordon the second is not even on this list, and we have 4 Big 12 schools on this list, and not the one that features the best running back in the country is ridiculous, man. And there's other guys too, like Cameron Scadaboo from Arizona State. It's a really good running back as well. Like they have loaded. The Big 12 is going to be unbelievable in terms of rushing ability. So anything you disagree with, Dalton, in that top 10, or is it perfect? Do you think?
No, I could get in on it. I think. I think
perfect.
Oregon's got some X factor in them. Like Jordan James grades out really, really well. Oregon, I think to me is the ultimate one here where the depth is winning out. And we know Oregon can always, since time began, Oregon could run the ball. So I think they're the one where on this entire list, they don't have like a household name-ish kind of star, but the depth is winning out, and we know they're going to run the football well.
Okay, so you would put Oregon a little bit higher, is what you're saying on the list.
I could argue. No, I could argue they're in the right spot. Maybe a spot or two lower. I really like the 2 that K-State have. I think Dylan Edwards is such a good compliment. Like maybe you could flip the 2, but I don't have any real big qualms with this order. I know Oregon's got depth, and Jordan James. The underlying metrics on Jordan James are extremely good.
Is there any, before we move on to the top 5, would you have put Oklahoma State and North Carolina, who, just spoiler, are not in the top 5 here? Would you have put them in the top 5 or top 10 just because of how good their starters are, or do you think the depth of the other schools is a little bit better?
There would have been a good argument with this 10 spot with West Virginia, just because Shaheem White's really young and C.J. Donaldson. I mean, you are talking about, like, with Gordon and then Amarion Hampton, like, those are arguably the 2 best backs in the country. I think there'd be an argument at 10, but it's hard with the depth of some of these teams to go any higher than that.
Yeah, that's why I put West Virginia at 10. I mean, they had 2 guys who ran for over 800 yards last year. One of them was a true freshman. So it's like it's so hard for me to do that, but that's what my 10 through 6 was. Now let's get to the 5 through 1 right now. At number 5 is Ole Miss. So Ole Miss lost one of the best running backs in the country. We'll talk about in a little bit, and Quinshon Judkins. They're still in the top 5 thanks to a deep running back room that they have. Ulysses Bentley is now the number 1 running back for them. He was one of the 25 most valuable running backs in the country, according to our wins above average metric, even as the number 2 running back behind Quinshon Judkins. And to make up for Judkins, they added a couple other guys in the transfer portal as well. Henry Parrish Jr. was a leading rusher for Miami. I mentioned before how Miami lost the leading rusher. Well, he went to Ole Miss, and Henry Parrish Jr., and you led the ACC with over 6.3 yards per attempt. So you led the ACC in yards per carry. And then also the other Miami of Ohio, Rashad Amos, went to Ole Miss as well. He was 3rd in the MAC with 1,080 rushing yards. So you have Ulysses Bentley, who's already a really, really talented running back, and one of the better number 2s that we had last year. Now would be the number 1. Then you add the leading ACC rusher last year in terms of yards per carry, and Henry Parrish Jr. And then you add Rashad Amos, who ran for over 1,000 yards in the MAC last year. So really deep running back room at Ole Miss, and why they're number 5, even though they lost an absolute superstar in Quinshon Judkins. At number 4 is Penn State, who for the 3rd year in a row will be headlined by the duo of Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. Singleton over the last 2 years is 2nd among Big Ten running backs with 3.7 yards after contact per attempt. And over the last 2 years, Katron Allen is 2nd among Big Ten running backs with a 92.1 rushing grade. The only running back in the Big Ten with a higher rushing grade in that span is Blake Corum. So they are really, really set really well. And then also they have a couple 4-star freshmen coming in, as you see right there at the bottom, and Quentin Martin and Corey Smith too. So one of the better duos that we have in college football was Singleton and Allen. Singleton a really good receiving threat out of the backfield as well. And that's why I check in at number 4 on this list. At number 3 is Georgia. So Georgia lost their 2 leading rushers from last year in Kendall Milton and Dejan Edwards, but they still have a really good room right now, mainly because they added Trevor Etienne from the transfer portal. Travis Etienne's little brother, obviously coming in from Florida, or Georgia's arch rival, which is pretty funny. He was 4th among SEC running backs last year with a 27% forced missed tackle rate. Branson Robinson missed all of last season with a ruptured patellar tendon, but as a true freshman in 2022, he had a 78.1 grade on over 100 snaps, and he was the number 2 running back in the 2022 high school class. So a lot of high expectations for Branson Robinson heading into his 3rd season. Roderick Robinson was a top 10 running back as well in the 2023 class. Should contribute more as a sophomore. And then the Bulldogs added 3 4-star running backs in the class of 2024 in Nathaniel Frazier, Dwight Phillips, and Chauncey Bowens. And Frazier was the number 2 running back in the country coming out of high school and a top 50 player overall. So Georgia, even though they lost some talent from last year, they brought in Trevor Etienne, and they still have some really, really good, intriguing options behind him as well. That's why they're number 3. At number 2 is UCF, Dalton, who is really loaded at running back. I know a lot of people are saying, whoa, UCF over Georgia. Like, what is going on here? It is ridiculous what they have at running back right now. R.J. Harvey, one of our top 10 running backs in the country. He was 6th in the nation last year with 1,417 rushing yards. He's a home run threat every time he touches the ball. And he had 17 carries of 20-plus yards, which were second to Ollie Gordon in the country as well. So they have him, and they added Penny Boone from the transfer portal from Toledo. He was the MAC Offensive Player of the Year last year, and he was 8th in the nation with 1,384 rushing yards. So you have the guy who was 6th in the nation in rushing yards and the guy who was 8th in the nation in rushing yards in the same backfield as well. So 2 guys who were in the top 10 leading rushers from last year, Dalton. No other school has 2 in the top 30 coming back as well. So it is ridiculous that UCF has. Also have Johnny Richardson, who ran for over 500 yards last year as UCF's number 2 running back. He's back for another year. They brought in Miles Montgomery from Cincinnati, who had a 90.6 rushing grade, which was 5th in the Big 12 on at least 65 attempts. And then also they added a 4-star recruit as well in Frankie Arthur. So UCF with KJ Jefferson as well at quarterback, who's a really good runner. They're going to have an unbelievable run game next year at UCF. But at number 1, and pretty easily number 1, Dalton, is obviously Ohio State, who has Quinshon Judkins, our number 2, I believe, running back in college football right now, at least for me, is number 2, transferred in from Ole Miss. Over the last 2 years, he leads all running backs in the Power 5 in rushing yards, yards after contact, and forced missed tackles. Travion Henderson comes back for another year. He's a top 10 running back in the country for us as well. 90 grade this past year, which was 7th among Power 5 running backs. And then they also brought in James Peoples, who was the number 8 running back in the 2024 recruiting class as well. But Ohio State checks in at number 1 because they have 2 top 10 running backs in the country, and nobody else on this list can say that.
Yeah, no, totally agree with the first 2. Absolutely. Ohio State, Judkins, and Henderson, that's the engine of this offense with Chip Kelly in there as our offensive coordinator. This UCF group is nasty, man. You talk about those 4 guys you just mentioned for them combined for over 3,700 yards last year. Gus Malzahn has built the UCF Knights in his image, man. That modern triple option football that he always ran at Auburn. He's got these 4 backs and KJ Jefferson. I really wish, I don't know who's going to be their top receiver this year because now they lost Javon Baker, but if they can find just another guy on that caliber to just balance out the passing game a little bit, this rushing offense at UCF is I don't even know what to say about it, especially schematically how Malzahn runs it. It's crazy. Harvey in space, Penny Boone getting downhill. We saw him run that rugged style at Toledo, like Montgomery and Richardson. It's a crazy level of talent and depth. And KJ Jefferson, like you mentioned, look, before last year in 2021 and 2022, he was like a top 20 quarterback in the country.
Yeah.
Like, he just had a down year last year. Everything's falling apart at Arkansas. Jefferson had to get out to a better situation. You know, UCF made it happen last year with John Rice Plumlee. I don't think there's a better replacement they could have found than Jefferson in this offense. They might go and set some Big 12 records running the ball with this group. But again, just highlights how many good running games are in the Big 12. And one more note on UCF. They were the highest graded team in the country that finished the year with a losing record at 6-7. So they're not a bad football team by any means at all. The record might be deceiving. Their defense needs a lot of work, but they can score. They can run the ball with anybody. I'm a little timid about here with Georgia at 3. I might bump them down a couple of spots. I love Etienne. Love the fit in their scheme. Love them at Florida. Like, absolutely love that fit. I just think Penn State having 2 guys that are proven, and Ole Miss having a whole bunch of guys, even though they lost Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt after spring ball to Arizona, like Logan Diggs and Amos and Parrish and Bentley, and like the way Kiffin runs the ball. I think I would like kind of slide Georgia to 5 and then go. I could argue about Penn State and Ole Miss 3 and 4, which order, because they're both really, really good. I think Georgia might come down a couple of spots for me just because I got one really proven guy. And I know Robinson did it on a small sample, but the fact that those two teams have multiple proven guys, I think I would go maybe something like Penn State 3, Ole Miss 4, and Georgia 5.
That's fair. I think Georgia, for me, obviously ETN is there. It is. I know, and again, I'm the recruiting guy on the show, right? I'm the one who cares about recruiting more than you. So that was really a big thing. Is that Georgia had a guy who was a number 2 running back recruit a few years ago, then the guy who was a top 10 running back recruit 2 years ago, and then they brought in 3 4-star running backs this past year too. So it's like that just loaded room. Like I know, like Ole Miss is a few, like three guys that are really, or 4 guys that are really good, and Penn State has 2 guys. It's like Georgia, the potential of Georgia is why I had them that high. But I get that though. You know, the Penn State and Ole Miss are certainly more proven than Georgia right now. But I just thought the potential with all those, like they have like 8 guys who were like a lot of other schools would kill for in their room. That was why I had Georgia, because it was just like, man, they have so many guys who were super highly rated coming out of high school. And that's why I think Georgia, like their number 8 running back on the depth chart, man, would be like the number 2 or 3 for a lot of other schools. So that's personally why I had Georgia at number 3. But I completely understand why you would be a little bit lower on them.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's just one of those things. It's like I'm always a guy I like to see it happen.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of like, I know the stars are great, and a lot of times the stars come true, and then there's other times where we don't. Right. Like it's just one of those things. Like, and that's why it was even hard on the back end of this list. Like there's some, when you talk about guys like Ollie Gordon and Taj Brooks and Amarion Hampton and even an Ashton Genty, even though it'd be hard to put a group of 5 team on this list, like there's superstars. This is more than it's been a while since we had this many good running backs, I think, in college football. This is like the year of the running back, because these top 10, this doesn't even do it justice. We could probably do a top 20, and you'd go, wow, there's some amazing running backs floating around college football right now. These are stacked units, no question. It might be the deepest position in college football this year at any spot.
I think it is. I think it is as well. So do you agree with the teams that were in the top 5? Were they one that you would put in the top 5? They were not, or do you agree that maybe a different order, like you said before? But do you think those are the top 5 that you would put in that list?
I think it's a reasonable top 5. Georgia might come down to 5-ish, maybe even 4 for me, a couple. But I think that top 5 is very reasonable. Miami's got an interesting team too, though, man. They picked up a lot, and Damian Martinez. That can't get underrated. We talk about Cam Ward being the X factor for them, but they've got some things to work with. You've got Martinez, you've got Mark Fletcher, you've got Xavier Restrepo on the outside. They've done a nice job surrounding Ward and giving him options and maybe taking some of that pressure off of him. Martinez is a horse, man. Physical, ran the ball a ton at Oregon State. I think that's a very interesting situation to watch. And as we get closer to the season and getting to August and things like that, I've been trying to figure out, like, the ACC, I think it's very, very hard to pin down, but it's hard. You've been kind of starting to convince me lately that maybe Miami's the most well-rounded. Maybe they're the most talented team, because you see them on a list like this, you see what they have on their defensive line, and you see, like, Cam Ward, you see Restrepo, and, like, you start to wonder about Miami. It's like the talent might all be there for them to make an ACC run finally.
I will spoil it right now because we're doing receiving cores, I'm assuming, next week. Miami's a top 10 receiving core. They have a top 10 running back unit like we just did. And they have a top 10 offensive line as well. So it's really it is set up nicely for Cam Ward next year, man. It really is on Cam. And Cam Ward's a high ceiling, too, which is not like Cam Ward's a big week, because he has a high ceiling. So the more I think about it, dude, and looking at that defensive line, I even think Miami's linebacker unit is pretty good. I didn't have in my top 10, but I think they're pretty good. I think the secondary is a little bit of a question mark for Miami, but the more I think about it, man, Miami might be the best team in the ACC next year. Now, and they might be my pick to win the conference. I haven't decided on that yet. I know I've been saying Clemson in a lot of the radio hits I've been doing, but the more I think about it, I'm like, man, it might actually be Miami. I'm a little scared to do that because of how many times people have been burned on Miami before. But just looking at that roster, man, it's like,
well, did it feel like they have not hit the portal like this before this year? They just haven't. Like the way that they attack the portal this year at a lot of different positions, that for me, it's actually more than the offense. And even Cam, we'll see what he does, about his turnover issues. That defensive line that's a D line that can win ball games.
Best edge room in the country, I think. I think they're the best edge room in the country.
It's filthy. Like picking up Tyler Barron late in the spring, that's a whole. I mean, they've got a level on the defensive line that not a lot of other teams have. That could actually be the best unit in the entire team.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So yeah, that's gonna be. I'm excited to get into our predictions later on because I think I might be leading Miami, man, with how loaded they are. But that's what we got for our top 10 running back units in college football heading into the 2024 season.